On the 25th of June, 1978, a guard walked into the cell block and read out a list of names. Miriam Lewin heard hers. So did Graciela Dalio and a dozen others. They were prisoners. Political prisoners, held inside a concentration camp in Buenos Aires. The guards told them to get up. They were taken outside, pushed into cars, and driven into the city. What they found in the streets stopped them cold. Hundreds of thousands of people, flags, chanting, dancing. Argentina, Argentina, Argentina had just won the World Cup, and the guards were forcing their prisoners to watch. Later that night, those prisoners sat at a restaurant table with their torturers, surrounded by celebration. Alone in a way that has no words. This is the story of the 1978 World Cup. Not the one you've been told, the real one. To understand what happened in Argentina in 1978, you need to go back 2 years. The 24th of March, 1976. A military coup. Tanks in the streets of Buenos Aires. General Jorge Rafael Videla seized power, arrested the elected president, and announced that Argentina had a new government. Within weeks, the killings started. Not in a war, not on a battlefield, in homes, in universities, in workplaces. The regime had a list, a mental list, of the kind of person it wanted gone. Students, trade unionists, journalists, lawyers, writers, social workers. Anyone suspected of left-wing sympathies, anyone who asked the wrong question. They called these people weeds. Something to be pulled up and destroyed to save Argentine society. And the method they used had a name. They called them the disappeared. In the night, a Ford Falcon would pull up outside your home. Men would get out. You'd be taken, hooded, driven somewhere, and you would never be seen again. Between 1,976 and 1,983, between 15,000 and 30,000 Argentines disappeared this way. Some were shot, some were tortured to death, and some drugged, barely conscious, were loaded onto naval aircraft and pushed, alive, into the Rio de la Plata. They called those the death flights. Pregnant women were kept alive long enough to give birth inside detention centers, then killed. Their babies were taken and given to military families to raise as their own. This was the Argentina that applied to host the World Cup, and FIFA said yes. The regime needed the tournament more than the tournament needed them. By 1977, international human rights organizations were sounding alarms. Amnesty International had published reports. Exiled Argentines were testifying to governments around the world. The disappearances were becoming impossible to hide. Videla saw the World Cup as the solution, a global audience, a global stage. A chance to show the world that Argentina was stable, modern, normal. He called it, without irony, the World Cup of Peace. He spent $700 million preparing for it. More than 10 times the original budget, stadiums, roads, hotels, a brand new color television network, all of it funded while his regime was murdering its own citizens. Foreign journalists flew in from around the world. Swedish coach Georg Eriksson told reporters, "Our stay here is marvelous. We're having a good time." The visiting teams practiced, ate well, gave press conferences, and less than a mile from the main stadium, inside a complex of buildings on Avenida del Libertador, something else was happening entirely. The ESMA, the Escuela Superior de Mecánica de la Armada, the Navy Mechanics School, a sprawling 40-acre complex. From the outside, ordinary, educational, institutional. Inside, it was one of 350 concentration camps that the junta operated across the country, and it was the largest. Approximately 5,000 people were taken through its back entrance during the dictatorship. Fewer than 1,000 survived. The torture rooms were inside the Casino de Oficiales, the officers' building. Prisoners were kept hooded, fed rotting food, held in cells so small they couldn't stand. They could hear everything through the walls. And on match days, In June 1978, what they heard was this: the roar of 100,000 people, because the main stadium, the Monumental, where the final was played, was right there. Not across the city, not in another neighborhood, a short walk away. The cheering of the World Cup crowd traveled through the walls of the ESMA and into the cells where people were being tortured. Prisoners reported that their guards watched the matches on television with them. Beaten and malnourished, barely able to stand, they were forced to cheer alongside the men who had been torturing them. One prisoner, Mario Villani, later described sitting under fluorescent lights watching the television as Videla handed the trophy to the Argentine captain. He fought not to cry, because if a guard saw him crying, he might go out on the next death flight. The opening ceremony of the one was held at the Monumental Stadium. A military band played as General Videla walked onto the pitch. The Catholic Cardinal of Argentina gave a blessing. Then handlers released hundreds of white doves into the sky. They rose above the stadium, and from the ESMA less than a mile away, prisoners could see them. White birds above a torture center. That image is somehow the whole story. Argentina's FIFA president João Havelange stood beside Videla and said nothing. When reporters asked about the disappearances, Videla told them the missing were living in Europe, that they couldn't be bothered to write home. Incredibly, the Catholic Cardinal of Argentina had said the same thing publicly. The world largely accepted this. And the tournament went on. Argentina were good, genuinely, legitimately good. Mario Kempes was the best striker in the world that summer. Osvaldo Ardiles was brilliant in midfield. Manager Cesar Menotti had built a real team, a team worth watching. They reached the second group stage, needing to beat Peru by 4 goals to overtake Brazil on goal difference and reach the final. What happened next has never been officially explained. Just before kickoff, General Videla walked into the Peruvian dressing room. He was accompanied by Henry Kissinger, who had recently left his role as U.S. Secretary of State. Videla read out a message from Peru's own military dictator, Francisco Bermudez, a message about the bond between the Argentine and Peruvian people. Then they left. Peru's players took the field. Argentina won 6-0. The crowd went delirious. Ticker tape rained from every stand. And somewhere in the accounting records, cargo ships were loading hundreds of thousands of tons of Argentine grain bound for Peru as humanitarian aid. Despite Peru suffering no natural disaster, former Peruvian Senator Gennaro Ledesma later testified in an Argentine court under oath. He said Videla agreed to accept 13 Peruvian political prisoners, dissidents opposed to Peru's own junta, in exchange for the result. 13 people, reportedly beaten and tortured upon arrival, handed over so that Argentina could score enough goals to reach a World Cup final. Videla needed to win the World Cup to cleanse Argentina's bad image around the world, Ledesma testified. So he only accepted the group if Peru allowed the Argentine national team to triumph. FIFA never opened an official investigation. They never have. Argentina beat the Netherlands 3-1 in the final. Mario Kempes scored twice in extra time. Ticker tape, tears, the whole country celebrating in the streets. Miriam Lewin was in those streets, forced there by her guards, surrounded by people celebrating, unable to tell a single one of them what was happening a mile away. Years later, she said that every 4 years, when the World Cup comes around, she works hard to avoid televisions and the crowds gathered around them. It makes me feel it could happen again, she said. Leopoldo Luque, the Argentine striker who scored twice in the Peru match, was asked about it decades later. With what I know now, he said, I can't say I am proud of my victory, but I didn't realize. Most of us didn't. We just played football. Ricardo Villa, his teammate, went further. There is no doubt, he said, that we were used politically. General Jorge Rafael Videla was eventually tried and convicted. Crimes against humanity, extrajudicial murder, the systematic theft of babies. He died in prison in 2013 at 87 years old, unrepentant. The ESMA is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a museum, a memorial. You can walk through the rooms where people were tortured, and from those rooms you can still see the stadium, the same stadium, still standing. Less than a mile away, the 1978 World Cup was real, the football was real, and what was happening 800 meters from the pitch was real too. The world watched one of those things and looked away from the other. That is the story, and it has never been fully told.